My wife betrayed me by secretly selling our family home for $350, $0 to pay off her gambling debts, only to later accuse me of theft when I uncovered her lies. Now we're headed to court over millions in property and savings she manipulated to ruin us. I never thought I'd be the guy telling a story like this, but here I am. Honestly, it feels like a bad movie sometimes, except it's my life, and it's real. The thing is, my wife Lisa, she's always been a bit of a bitch, but I never thought she'd be capable of something so cold and calculated. The betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks, and what makes it worse is how she lied and manipulated everything, turning our lives upside down. It all started about 6 months ago when I began noticing little things. Lisa's been acting distant, secretive. She'd hide her phone more often and get defensive whenever I asked about her day. She'd brush me off with some excuse, saying she was stressed at work or she was talking to her sister. I figured maybe she was just overwhelmed with the new job she'd taken, but deep down I sensed something was off. Then there were the late nights. She'd stay out past midnight more often than not. I'd ask where she was and she'd say she was at the office or out with friends. But I found her phone bill, her texts with some guy named Mark. At first, I thought maybe it was just work-related, but the messages weren't professional. They were flirtatious, full of innuendos, and she'd often sign off with "can't wait to see you again." That's when I started to suspect this wasn't just some innocent friendship. I remember the night I finally caught her. I was in the study, going through some emails, and I saw her phone lying on the kitchen table. I glanced at the screen and my stomach dropped. There were texts from Mark, not just friendly but clearly intimate. Some of the messages were about meeting up, about sex. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. My hands trembled as I read her words, realizing she'd been lying to me for months. I had no idea how to process it. What made it worse was the way she reacted when I confronted her. I called her into the living room, showed her the messages, and asked her outright. Her face twisted into a sneer and she told me I was overreacting. "It's just sex, John," she said, like that made everything okay. "It doesn't mean anything, you're just insecure." That was her go-to line: blame me, call me jealous, play the victim. But I knew better. I knew this wasn't about just sex. It was about her betraying everything we built together. Her reaction stunned me. Instead of being remorseful or embarrassed, she got angry. She started yelling, calling me paranoid, accusing me of spying on her. She said I was controlling and that I didn't trust her. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but the evidence was right there. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. My mind was racing. How long had this been going on? Who was Mark? And most of all, why? Why would she do this to me? I was overwhelmed with a mix of emotions: anger, hurt, confusion. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the moment I found her messages, trying to understand how someone I loved and trusted could do something so cruel. I started questioning everything. About our marriage, about her loyalty, about whether I'd missed the signs. It was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. And the worst part, I knew this was just the beginning of a long, painful journey. After that night, everything changed. The trust I once had in Lisa was shattered into pieces, and I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. I felt like I was living with a stranger, someone who had lied to me for months, who had been sneaking around behind my back, and who had the audacity to accuse me of being paranoid when I found out. I spent days obsessing over every detail, trying to piece together how deep this betrayal went. Lisa, of course, everything at first. She insisted she wasn't cheating, that Mark was just an old friend she'd been talking to for years, and that I was overreacting. She threw around words like trust, insecurities, and stupid jealousy, all designed to make me doubt my instincts. But I wasn't buying it anymore. The evidence was right there on her phone, and her reaction only confirmed my suspicions. Things got worse when I started digging into her finances. She'd always been secretive about money, but I thought it was just her way of managing her own stuff. Turns out, she'd been secretly selling parts of our property without telling me. I found out she sold our family home for $350, $0, and I didn't even know she was planning it. She claimed she did it to pay off her gambling debts, which I later discovered she accumulated secretly over the past year. She'd been sneaking cash out of our joint accounts, lying about where the money was going. I confronted her again, this time with bank statements and receipts. She spun some story about how she was desperate and didn't want to burden me, but her words rang hollow. I realized she'd been manipulating me, lying about everything and hiding her debts for months. The house, our savings, everything was being drained to cover her gambling addiction. I felt betrayed not only emotionally but financially as well. She'd put us on the brink of ruin and I was furious. The most shocking part was when I found out she also been secretly seeing Mark during this time. I caught her one night sneaking out of the house when I was at work. She left her phone behind and I found texts from Mark talking about their secret meetings, how they couldn't keep their hands off each other. I saw pictures of her and Mark at a hotel, her in a skimpy dress, him smiling like a fool. It was like my entire world was collapsing. How could she do this? How could she betray me, our marriage, our family, all for some guy she barely knew? I felt so stupid for not noticing the signs earlier. I had been blind, trusting her blindly, and now I was paying the price. I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak. I had poured my heart into this marriage, worked hard to build a life for us, and she had been plotting behind my back all along. The betrayal was so deep that I started questioning everything. Was I even enough? Did she ever love me, or was I just a convenient fallback? The more I uncovered, the more I realized that this was no ordinary affair. It was a full-blown betrayal that threatened to destroy everything I cared about. At this point, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her keep manipulating and lying to me. I needed a plan, but I was still trying to process what I just uncovered. The shock was overwhelming, but I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't going to end with her getting away with it. I was determined to find out the truth, to get to the bottom of her lies, and to do whatever it took to get justice. Because at the end of the day, betrayal like this doesn't just hurt, it destroys everything. And I wasn't going to let her win without a fight. Once I had all the pieces, her secret sales of the house, her gambling debts, the affair with Mark, I realized I needed to act fast. Sitting around, feeling sorry for myself, or trying to talk things out with Lisa wasn't going to cut it anymore. I had to get ahead of her lies, figure out exactly how deep her manipulation went, and plan my next move carefully. The first thing I did was hire a private investigator. I didn't trust her to be honest anymore. I needed proof, concrete evidence that she was actively betraying me and not just lying about the past. Within a week, the pie confirmed what I already suspected. Lisa was still seeing Mark, and she'd been meeting him at that hotel during the nights she claimed to be working late. The investigator also found out she'd been funneling money to Mark, probably as part of her secret dealings with him, which explained why she'd been so secretive about her finances. That was the moment I knew I had to confront her differently this time. I couldn't just accuse her and hope she'd break down or confess. I had to be strategic. I started collecting everything: bank statements, text messages, hotel receipts, even recordings from the pie. I wanted irrefutable proof that she was lying, cheating, and stealing from us. It was a sickening feeling, knowing I'd been played for a fool, but I also knew this was the only way I could ensure I had leverage. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act of denial, throwing tantrums, accusing me of trying to ruin her, calling me paranoid and jealous. She'd scream about how she deserved better and how I was controlling. She insisted she was just stressed, that Mark was just a friend, and that I was imagining things. But I knew better. I'd seen the evidence, and I wasn't about to let her gaslight me into doubting myself. One night, I decided I'd had enough of her lies. I sat her down, pulled out everything I had: screenshots of her texts, the hotel receipts, the bank statements showing her secret withdrawals. I told her I knew everything, that I had proof of her affair and her financial deception. Her face went pale and she started to stammer. For the first time, her bravado crumbled. She tried to deny it again, but I cut her off. I told her I was done being played the fool. Her reaction was predictably bitchy. She yelled, called me a crazy man, accused me of spying on her, and said I was ruining her life. She looked at me with contempt, sneering that I'd never be able to prove anything, that she'd always be one step ahead. That's when I realized she'd been planning her lies all along, just waiting for a moment to spin her story and turn things around. But I wasn't going to let her. I had the evidence and I was ready to use it. The next step was figuring out what I was going to do with all this information. I knew I had to be careful. If I went straight to the lawyer or the authorities, she might disappear or hide more of her secrets. I decided I'd confront her one last time, give her a chance to come clean, and then make my move. I wasn't about to let her manipulate me or the situation anymore. I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. Relief that I finally knew the truth, and dread about what was coming next. Looking back, I realized that this whole ordeal has changed me forever. I trusted her blindly for years, and she broke that trust in the worst way possible. But I also learned that sometimes you have to be ruthless in protecting yourself. If someone is willing to lie, cheat, and steal from you, especially under the guise of love, they don't deserve your forgiveness or your future. I'm not sure how this will all end, but I do know one thing. I'm not the same man I was before. And I'll be damned if I let her destroy me without a fight. The confrontation I planned was intense. I knew I could just lay out the evidence and expect her to crack immediately, but I also knew I had to be firm. I waited until she came home from her work night, and I had everything set up in the living room. Her face was already bitter and bitchy, the usual sneer, when she saw me sitting there with a folder of papers and her phone on the table. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Lisa, I know everything. The affair, the sale of the house, the gambling debts, you've been lying to me for months. I've got the proof. I want to hear it from you. Tell me the truth, or I swear I'll take this to the authorities." Her eyes widened and she started to stammer, trying to deny it all. I cut her off. I told her I had the hotel receipts, the bank statements, the texts. I told her I knew about Mark and her secret money funneling. Her bitchy attitude shifted to pure anger. She launched into a tirade, calling me a paranoid control freak, claiming I was just jealous and insecure. She said she was stressed out, that I was overreacting, and that I was ruining her life. I just stared at her, feeling the rage boil inside me. Honestly, I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. She looked at me with total disdain, like I was some fool who couldn't see how clever she was. She even had the nerve to say, "You think you're so smart, don't you? Well, you're not going to get anything out of me." I was calm but firm. I told her I wasn't interested in her excuses anymore. I told her I was done being played. I said I was going to file for divorce, get a legal settlement, and take back what's mine. Our house, our savings, everything she'd manipulated. Her face twisted into a sneer and she spat back. "You'll never get a dime. You're too stupid to understand what's really going on. I've covered my tracks and I'll make sure you pay for this." That's when I knew she was planning some kind of revenge, probably trying to hide even more of her lies or spin it so I'd look like the villain. But I wasn't about to let her. I told her, "You've lied, cheated, and stolen from me. You've betrayed everything we built. I'm not going to let you walk away with my life, my money, or my future. I've got enough evidence to take this to court, and I will." Her bitchy smirk disappeared for a moment, replaced by a flicker of panic. She started to cry, but it wasn't genuine. It was more like a show, her way of trying to manipulate me into feeling guilty. I felt a strange sense of clarity. I finally saw her for what she was, a selfish, manipulative woman who'd do anything to cover her tracks and keep her secrets. I realized that trying to reason with her was pointless. The only way forward was to get legal help, protect myself, and make sure she couldn't hurt me anymore. I grabbed my phone and called my lawyer right then and there, telling him everything. I explained I wanted an emergency restraining order, a full financial audit, and full custody of the kids. Lisa's reaction was to explode. She yelled, called me a controlling bastard, and accused me of trying to ruin her life. She threatened to destroy me in court, to take everything I had, and to make sure I paid for exposing her. But I was done listening to her bitchy rants. I had made my decision. I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine, and I was going to do it without her manipulating me anymore. That night, I stayed up late, going over everything, her lies, her debts, her affair. I couldn't sleep, knowing that the woman I loved had been secretly screwing around, selling our home and stealing from us. It was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I knew the road ahead was going to be rough, but I also knew I had to stand tall. I'd been betrayed in the worst way, but I'd be damned if I let her win. This was my life, and I was going to take it back, no matter what. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I got my lawyer involved immediately, and we filed for divorce, along with a court order to freeze her accounts and seize any assets she tried to hide. The moment I handed over the evidence, texts, receipts, bank statements, it was clear she was in damage control mode. She tried to spin it all, calling me a paranoid control freak, claiming I was making everything up. But the court didn't buy her act. The evidence was undeniable. Lisa's bitchy attitude only intensified as she realized I was serious. She started shouting at me, saying I was ruining her life, that I was a jealous loser who couldn't handle her success. She even had the nerve to say I was the one cheating just because I'd caught her. That was her typical tactic: deflect, deny, blame. She was trying to turn the tables, but I wasn't falling for it. I knew her game now. She was desperate to save her ass, but it was too late. The court proceedings were brutal. Lisa's lawyer tried every trick in the book, claiming I was controlling, that I had no right to the house because she had a right to sell it. But I had the proof that she sold it without my consent to cover her gambling debts, and that she'd been manipulating our finances for months. The judge saw through her lies, and I got the court to order her to pay back the money from the sale, plus damages for the financial fraud. Meanwhile, I also uncovered more about her affair with Mark. She'd been meeting him even after I confronted her the first time. The hotel receipts, the texts, they showed she was still sneaking around, even as she was trying to deny everything. That was the final nail in her coffin. The judge granted me full custody of the kids, and I made sure she wouldn't get away with any more manipulation. Her bitchy, manipulative side really came out during this time. She tried to guilt-trip the kids, tell them I was the bad guy, that I was trying to take everything from her. But I made sure they saw the truth. She was the one lying, cheating, and stealing. I sat them down and explained everything in age-appropriate terms so they wouldn't be caught in the middle of her drama. They're young, but they're smart, and I knew they could see through her act. As for Lisa, she ended up losing everything: our house, her savings, her reputation. She tried to fight back with more lies, but it was all too late. The court ordered her to pay back the stolen money, and she was left with nothing but her bitchy attitude and a mountain of debt she created herself. I felt a strain, mix of relief and sadness. Relief that I was finally free, and sadness for what I'd lost, especially the years I wasted trusting someone who turned out to be so selfish. Looking back, I realize I learned a lot from this nightmare. Trust is fragile, and sometimes people hide who they really are behind a pretty face and sweet words. I also learned that in the end, you have to fight for yourself. No one's coming to save you, especially not someone who's been lying and cheating behind your back. I've come out of this stronger, more cautious, and more aware of what I need to protect myself and my kids from. So, if there's one thing I'd say to anyone in a similar situation, it's this: trust your instincts. Don't ignore the red flags, and don't be afraid to dig deep. The truth always comes out, and it's better to face it head-on than to let someone manipulate you into believing their lies. Because in the end, you have to do what's best for you, no matter how bitchy or manipulative the other person gets. I'm still healing, still rebuilding, but I know I'll be okay. And I hope anyone else going through this finds the strength to fight for their own happiness too. Looking back now, I realize how much this whole nightmare has changed me, probably forever. I used to think I was a trusting guy, maybe even a little naive. I believed in loyalty, in honesty, in the idea that marriage was supposed to be forever. But Lisa proved me wrong in the worst way possible. She betrayed everything I held dear: our home, our future, our family. And she did it all with such cold calculation that I sometimes wonder if I ever really knew her at all. The thing I've learned through all of this is that people aren't always who they appear to be. Lisa was a master manipulator, lying, cheating, stealing, and then turning around to blame me for everything. She played the victim when she was the villain. That realization hit me hard, but it also freed me. It made me see that I deserved better, that I shouldn't have to accept betrayal and lies as part of life. Now I focus on rebuilding myself, my relationship with my kids, my future. I've cut out the toxic people, learned to trust my instincts, and most importantly, I've learned that no matter how much someone tries to manipulate or deceive, the truth always has a way of coming out. It's painful, sure, it's messy. But in the end, honesty and integrity are what matter most. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, I want you to know this. Don't ignore the red flags. Trust your gut. And don't be afraid to fight for yourself. It might be painful, it might be ugly, but standing up for your truth is the only way to truly move forward. Because at the end of the day, your happiness and peace of mind are worth more than any lie or betrayal. I won't pretend I'm completely healed. There are days when the hurt still lingers, when I wonder how I could have missed the signs or why she chose to do this to us. But I also know that I'm stronger than I thought. I've faced the worst and come out the other side. And I promise you, if you're in a similar boat, you will too. Life goes on. The pain eventually fades. And one day, you'll look back and realize that what once felt like the end was really just a new beginning, a chance to rebuild, to learn, and to find someone who truly deserves your trust. That's what I'm holding on to now. Because after everything, I know I deserve honesty, loyalty, and love, something Lisa was never willing to give. And I refuse to settle for less anymore.